Clara Bennett never imagined her marriage would be nothing more than a signature on paper. Forced to marry Garrett Morgan to save the family farm, she expected coldness, but she didn't expect the silent pain that would follow. One intimate night that should have brought them together ended up tearing them apart forever. Blood secrets, hidden inheritances, and a forbidden love that had spanned generations were about to explode. But when the truth finally came to light, no one was ready for what they would discover. If you're already curious to know what happened, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. Where are you listening to this story from? Your support is what keeps this channel going and bringing you stories that touch the heart. The June morning settled heavy over Willow Hill Farm, as if even the air knew something was wrong. Clara Bennett stood at the window of the room that had been hers her entire life, watching the final preparations for a wedding she hadn't chosen. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows in the front garden, decorated with silk bows that cost more than her family could afford to spend. But it no longer mattered what they had or didn't have. "Clara, you need to get ready." Margaret's voice, her stepmother's, cut through the silence like a blade. "The dress is on the bed, and the makeup artist will be here in an hour." Clara didn't turn around. Her fingers gripped the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. "I could still back out," she murmured, more to herself than to Margaret. "Back out?" The bitter laugh echoed through the room. "Honey, there's nowhere to run. The papers have already been signed, the guests have arrived, and your father—" Margaret paused deliberately. "Your father can't afford to keep the farm anymore. You know that." Clara finally turned, and her green eyes met the hard face of the woman who had married her father when she was just a child. Margaret had never pretended to love her, but today she wasn't even trying to hide the satisfaction in her dark eyes. "Why him?" Clara asked, her voice coming out more fragile than she'd like. "Why Garrett Morgan?" "Because the Morgan family has old ties with us, because they have the money we need, and because—" Margaret stepped closer, adjusting a strand of Clara's brown hair with fake tenderness. "You don't have a choice." The sound of tires on the gravel road announced the arrival of the first guests. Clara felt her stomach turn when she recognized the black car, too elegant for these rural parts of Georgia. Garrett Morgan had arrived. She'd only seen him twice before, the first time when their parents met to discuss the arrangement 3 months ago. He had sat in silence in the living room, his ice-blue eyes examining her as if she were property to be appraised. The second time was at the signing of the preliminary papers, when he spoke no more than 10 words during the entire meeting. "He's handsome, admit it," Margaret said, watching through the window as Garrett got out of the car. "Many women would kill to be in your place." Clara watched the man who would be her husband in a few hours walk toward the house. He was tall. His broad shoulders filled his dark suit perfectly. His black hair was impeccably styled, and even from a distance she could see the rigid posture of someone used to controlling everything around him. Handsome? Maybe. But there was something about Garrett Morgan that made her blood run cold. "Beauty doesn't pay the bills," Clara murmured. "No, but his money does." Margaret headed to the door. "Put on the dress. In an hour, you'll be Mrs. Morgan." Alone again, Clara allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her legs trembled, and she sat on the edge of the bed where she had slept for 23 years. The wedding dress lay beside her, simple white silk, elegant but without sparkle, as if even the clothes knew there was no love that day. She thought of her mother, Marina, who had died when Clara was only 12. Marina Bennett had been a woman of dreams, a pianist who had abandoned a promising career to live in the countryside, raise a family, and play only for the walls of Willow Hill Farm. In her final days, delirious with fever, Marina had whispered names Clara didn't recognize, talked about secrets and things a 12-year-old girl couldn't understand. "What would you do, Mum?" she asked quietly to the empty room. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs brought her back to reality. It was her father, Thomas Bennett, climbing slowly as if each step carried the weight of all his wrong choices. "Clara?" He knocked gently on the door. "May I come in?" "Come in, Dad." Thomas Bennett was a man who had once been strong, but recent years had bent his shoulders and carved deep lines into his face. When he entered the room, Clara saw something in his eyes that scared her more than anything Margaret had said. Regret. "My little girl." he began, his voice hoarse. I wish there was another way. But there is, Dad. We can sell the farm. We can start over somewhere else. Thomas slowly shook his head. It's not just the farm, Clara. It's the debts. It's the loans I took thinking things would get better. If I don't do this, he stepped closer, taking her hands between his, calloused from farm work. They'll take everything. And you don't deserve to pay for my mistakes. But this marriage is making me pay for your mistakes, Dad. The words came out harsher than Clara intended, and she saw her father recoil as if he'd been slapped. For a moment, the silence between them was so thick she could hear her own heart beating. Garrett Morgan is a good man, Thomas finally said, but his voice carried no conviction. He'll take care of you. He'll give you things I never could. And love, Dad? Who's going to give me that? Thomas closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were moist. Sometimes love comes after, Clara. Your mother and I, we didn't start out in love, but we learned to love each other. Clara knew it was a lie. She had seen the letters Marina wrote to someone named Richard, letters she never sent but kept in a box under the bed. She had felt the sadness her mother carried like an invisible cloak, especially in her final years. He doesn't even know me, Dad, and I don't know him. How can it work out like this? Maybe that's better, Thomas replied, avoiding her eyes. No expectations, no complications. Outside, more cars were arriving. Clara could hear voices, forced laughter, the sound of people preparing to witness a lie dressed as a celebration. I need to get ready, she said, standing up. Thomas hesitated at the door, as if he wanted to say something more, but finally he just murmured, Your mother would be proud of you, before leaving. Clara was alone with the wedding dress and the weight of a future she hadn't chosen. She walked to the old mirror in the corner of the room, the same mirror where her mother got ready every morning. For a moment, Clara swore she saw Marina's reflection beside her own, whispering something she couldn't understand. When she put on the dress, Clara felt as if she were preparing for her own funeral. The cold silk against her skin gave her chills, and the pearls Margaret insisted she wear seemed to weigh more than jewelry should weigh. Outside, the music began to play. It was a string quartet that Margaret had hired, playing a melancholic version of the wedding march. Through the window, Clara could see Garrett Morgan waiting at the makeshift altar, hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of absolute composure. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't anxious. He was just present, as if it were a business meeting, and maybe that's exactly what it was. Clara walked down the stairs slowly, each step taking her further from the life she knew and closer to an uncertain future. Thomas waited for her at the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm with a sad smile. Ready? He asked. Clara looked one last time at the house that had been her world for 23 years, the walls that had heard her childhood laughter, her teenage tears, her dreams whispered in the darkness. In a few hours she would have another surname, another life, another identity. No, she whispered, but let's go ahead anyway. When the doors opened and Clara began walking toward the altar, she met Garrett Morgan's blue eyes. For a split second, she thought she saw something there, surprise perhaps, or even approval. But when she blinked, his expression had returned to its usual icy neutrality. There was no love in those eyes, no affection, just resignation. And when the pastor asked if she took Garrett as her husband, Clara answered, I do, with a steady voice, even knowing she was lying to God, to everyone present, and especially to herself. But what none of them knew was that this loveless marriage would plant the seeds of a passion so intense and forbidden that it would nearly destroy them all. Tentar novamente. The reception had ended 2 hours ago, but Clara could still hear the echo of forced conversations and fake smiles ringing in her ears. Now alone in the master bedroom of the Morgan mansion, she watched through the panoramic window as the city lights spread like fallen stars in the darkness. The house was imposing, modern, cold, everything opposite to Willow Hill Farm where she had grown up. The wedding dress was carefully hung in the closet, like a ghostly reminder of a day that seemed to have lasted an eternity. Clara had changed into a white silk nightgown that Margaret had insisted she buy. For the wedding night, she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her stiffen. Garrett was coming. The door opened slowly and he entered without making a sound. He had removed his jacket and tie, but still wore the white dress shirt, with the first few buttons undone. His black hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it several times. "I thought you'd already be asleep," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I couldn't sleep." Clara turned to face him, her nervous hands playing with the fabric of the nightgown. "And you? Why did you take so long?" Garrett hesitated, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw a crack in his armor of composure. "I was thinking. About? About us. About what happened today." He approached slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might flee at any moment. "Clara, I know this isn't what you wanted." She almost laughed at the irony. "And is it what you wanted, Garrett?" He stopped a few feet away from her, his blue eyes studying her face in the dim light of the room. "I don't know what I want anymore," he admitted, and the raw honesty in his voice surprised her. The silence between them stretched, heavy with tension and unspoken expectations. Clara could feel her heart beating so hard, she was sure he could hear it. "Are you afraid of me?" Garrett asked, taking another step toward her. "Should I be?" "No." The answer came quick, firm. "Never." He was close enough now for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely masculine. Clara raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there made her shiver. It wasn't the usual coldness, but something deeper, more dangerous. "Clara." He murmured her name like it was a prayer. "Yes? May I touch you?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected him to simply take what he considered his by marital right, but there he was, asking permission as if she were something precious and fragile. She nodded, unable to find words. His hand rose slowly, fingers touching her cheek with a gentleness that contrasted brutally with the hardness she had seen in him during the day. The touch was warm, and Clara instinctively closed her eyes, leaning into the contact. "You're beautiful," he said, and there was something of surprise in his voice, as if he were discovering this for the first time. "Garrett." "Shh." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, moving down her neck. "Don't speak. Not now." Clara opened her eyes and found his fixed on hers, a burning intensity glowing in the blue depths. When he leaned down to kiss her, she didn't pull back. The kiss started hesitant, almost experimental, as if they were both testing unknown waters. But when Clara responded, threading her fingers through his hair, something changed. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more necessary. Garrett's hands moved down her arms, outlined her waist, pulled her closer until there was no space between them. Clara could feel his heart beating against her chest, as fast as her own. "Clara," he murmured against her lips, and there was a desperation in his voice she hadn't expected. "What is it?" He pulled back slightly, studying her face. Have you been with anyone before?" The question made her blush violently. She lowered her eyes, suddenly aware of her inexperience, of how obvious she must be. "No," she whispered. The admission seemed to affect Garrett in a way she couldn't decipher. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting an internal battle. "Garrett, does that matter?" "It matters because I don't want to hurt you." He opened his eyes, and she saw something she hadn't expected to find there. Tenderness. "Because you deserve for this to be special." "And will it be special?" A sad smile touched his lips. "I don't know if I can promise that, but I can promise I'll be careful." When he kissed her again, it was with a gentleness that completely disarmed her. His hands explored with reverence, as if she were something sacred. And for a few precious moments, Clara managed to forget that this marriage had been an arrangement, managed to pretend there was love in those caresses. He guided her to the bed with a patience she hadn't expected, whispering sweet words that made her heart race. When his hands found the ties of her nightgown, she trembled. "Are you sure?" he asked, even with his eyes dark with desire. "No," she answered honestly, "but do it anyway." What followed was a confusing mixture of pleasure and discomfort, of moments of genuine connection interspersed with the brutal reality that they were two strangers trying to create intimacy where none existed. Garrett was careful, gentler than she had imagined he would be, but even so, when she whispered no in a moment of unexpected pain, he hesitated for only a second before continuing. "It's all right," he murmured against her neck, the words more for himself than for her. "It's going to be all right." But Clara wasn't sure if that was true. Afterward, they lay side by side in the darkness, sweat cooling on their skin, silence weighing between them like a third presence in the room. Clara was turned to her side, pretending to sleep, but every fiber of her being was painfully aware of the man beside her. Garrett was awake too. She could tell by the tension in his body, by his irregular breathing. At one point, she felt his fingers lightly touch her hair, a gesture so tender it almost made her cry. "Clara," he whispered. So low she almost didn't hear. She turned to face him, and in the faint light coming through the window, she saw something on his face that gave her hope for the first time that day. Vulnerability. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice carrying a confession that seemed torn from his depths. "I don't know how to be a husband, how to be intimate with someone, and I don't know how to be a wife," she replied softly. He turned completely toward her, reaching out to touch her face. "Maybe we can learn together." For a moment, Clara believed it might be possible. Maybe that unexpected tenderness, that vulnerability he had shown, was the beginning of something real. "Garrett," she began, wanting to say something meaningful, something that could build a bridge between them. But he was already pulling away, getting up from the bed. "You should sleep," he said, his voice returning to the neutral tone she knew. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Clara sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her body. "Will you stay?" Garrett stopped in the middle of the room, his back to her. For a long moment she thought he would say yes, that he would come back to bed and hold her hand until she fell asleep. "I have some work to finish," he said finally, already heading to the bathroom. "Good night, Clara." "Good night," she murmured to the closing door. Clara was left alone in the bed that still carried the warmth of both of them, his scent embedded in the sheets. She touched her lips, still tender from his kisses, and tried to understand what had happened. For a few moments, she had seen the man behind the cold mask. She had felt a genuine connection, a possibility of a future. But now, hearing the sound of the shower in the bathroom, she realized that maybe those moments of tenderness had been just an illusion. Maybe Garrett Morgan was exactly what she thought he was, a man who saw marriage as a contract and her as an obligation to be fulfilled. When she finally fell asleep, hours later, it was with the feeling that something had begun and ended that same night. And when she woke up the next morning, the bed was empty beside her, as if Garrett had never been there. On the nightstand, there was only a note. "Business trip. Back next week." Clara held the paper with trembling hands, feeling something break inside her chest. He had left without saying goodbye, leaving her alone in a house that wasn't hers, with memories of a night she didn't know if it had been real or just a cruel dream. She didn't know yet that that night had planted more than doubts and disappointments in her heart. 3 weeks had passed since Garrett left, and Clara felt as if she were living in a ghost house. The Morgan mansion was a maze of empty corridors and silent rooms, where her footsteps echoed like constant reminders of her loneliness. She had tried to establish a routine, walks in the elaborately maintained garden, reading in the luxurious library, attempts to talk with the housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, who always responded with icy politeness. That July morning, Clara woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. It wasn't hunger. It was something different, an uneasiness that seemed to come from within. When she tried to eat the breakfast Mrs. Henderson had prepared, the smell of scrambled eggs made her run to the bathroom. "Mrs. Morgan?" The housekeeper's concerned voice came from the other side of the door. "Are you all right?" Clara leaned against the sink, her pale face reflected in the golden mirror. "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. Must have been something I ate yesterday." But even as she said it, a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. She counted the days since the wedding night, since Garrett had touched her with that confused tenderness that now seemed to have happened in another lifetime. 2 weeks later, the suspicion became certainty. Clara was sitting in Dr. Matthews' office, her hands trembling as he confirmed what she already knew deep in her heart. "Congratulations, Mrs. Morgan. You're pregnant. About 6 weeks along." The words seemed to echo in the office like a distant sound. Clara fixed her gaze on her hands folded in her lap, trying to process the information. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. "Absolutely. The blood test confirmed it." Dr. Matthews leaned forward, his kind face showing concern. "You don't seem happy about the news." Clara forced a smile. It's a lot to process. My husband is traveling." "Ah, yes? Business, I imagine. Well, when he returns, I'm sure he'll be very happy." But Clara wasn't so sure. Garrett had left without a word, leaving only that cold note. How would he react to the news that the wife he barely knew was expecting a child? During the drive home, Clara tried to imagine how she would share the news. Maybe when Garrett returned, she would prepare a special dinner, find a romantic way to share the news. Maybe a baby could be the bridge they needed to build something real between them. But when she arrived home, she found Mrs. Henderson at the front door, her normally impassive face showing something Clara had never seen before: panic. "What happened?" Clara asked, her heart racing. "There are reporters at the door, ma'am." "Many reporters." Clara looked past the housekeeper and saw what she meant. A crowd of people with cameras and microphones clustered outside the property gates, like vultures waiting for carrion. "Reporters? Why?" Mrs. Henderson handed her a newspaper, her face grave. "You'd better see for yourself." Clara took the newspaper with trembling hands. The main headline hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Morgan Scandal. New wife strategically gets pregnant to secure fortune." Below it, a photo of her leaving Dr. Matthews' office, apparently taken from far away with a powerful lens. The article was a cruel and detailed speculation about how Clara Bennett had seduced Garrett Morgan into a quick marriage and was now using a pregnancy to secure access to the family fortune. A source close to the Morgan family confirms that the young woman from a bankrupt rural family carefully planned the pregnancy to secure her financial position, one of the paragraphs read. "The convenient timing of the pregnancy, just 6 weeks after the wedding, raises questions about the true intentions of the new Mrs. Morgan." Clara felt her legs weaken. "How did they find out? How do they know about the pregnancy?" "I don't know, ma'am. But they've been there since early morning asking questions." Clara's hands shook so much she could barely hold the newspaper. Someone had leaked confidential medical information. Someone had turned what should have been an intimate and private moment into a humiliating public spectacle. The phone rang, shrill in the silence of the house. Mrs. Henderson answered. "Morgan Mansion." "No, she has no comment." "No, Mr. Morgan is not available." The housekeeper hung up and turned to Clara. "They want a statement." "And what should I say?" Clara asked, her voice coming out bitter. "That I didn't plan this? That I barely know my own husband? That—" The sound of tires on the road interrupted her. Clara ran to the window and saw Garrett's familiar black car driving through the gates, passing the reporters who shouted questions and took photos. He was back. Clara ran down the stairs, her heart beating erratically. Maybe he would believe her. Maybe when she explained that she hadn't planned anything, that the pregnancy had been as much a surprise to her as it would be to him. The front door burst open, and Garrett entered like a hurricane. His blue eyes were icy, colder than Clara had ever seen them. He was holding a copy of the same newspaper she had in her hands. "Garrett, I can explain." "Explain?" He laughed, a humorless sound. "What exactly are you going to explain, Clara? How you planned this from the beginning?" "I didn't plan anything. You have to believe me." "Believe you?" Garrett approached, and Clara instinctively backed away. "You want me to believe it's a coincidence? That you got pregnant by chance right on the first night?" "It was on the first night. It was the only night. You know that." "Do I really?" His eyes pierced her like ice. "You seemed very experienced for someone who claimed to be a virgin." The accusation hit her like a slap. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. "How can you say that? You were there. You know I know you came from a bankrupt family. I know you desperately needed money. And I know that now, conveniently, you're pregnant and financially secure for the rest of your life." "Garrett, please." Clara reached out to him, but he pulled away as if her touch were poisonous. "Very well calculated, I have to admit. Marry me, seduce me on the wedding night, get pregnant immediately. Now you have access to the Morgan fortune forever. I didn't seduce you. You were the one who—" Clara stopped, realizing how her words might sound. "Garrett, you know it wasn't like that." "Do I?" He threw the newspaper on the coffee table, the pages scattering. "Because all I know is that I married a stranger who apparently is much smarter than I imagined." Clara felt something break definitively inside her. The pain of betrayal, of mistrust, was worse than any physical pain she had ever felt. "Do you really believe I would do this?" she asked, her voice coming out as a whisper. "That I would plan to get pregnant by a man who barely knows me, who left the next day without a word?" Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe regret. But it lasted only a second before the cold mask returned to its place. "I believe in facts. And the facts are that you're pregnant, you need money, and now you have access to both." Clara straightened up, wiping the tears from her face with the back of her hand. Something had changed inside her. The pain was transforming into anger, into determination. "You want facts, Garrett? Here's a fact. I was a virgin. I can prove that." "How?" "Medical exams. Dr. Matthews can confirm it. There's physical evidence that proves that was my first time." For the first time since he had arrived, Garrett hesitated. The certainty in his eyes wavered. "And here's another fact," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength. "I don't need your money. Not like this. Not being publicly humiliated. Not being accused of being an opportunist." "Clara." "No." She raised her hand, interrupting him. "You chose to believe strangers instead of believing the woman who married you. You chose to assume the worst about me without even giving me a chance to explain." Clara headed toward the stairs, then stopped and turned to face him one last time. "You want to know the truth, Garrett? I was happy about the pregnancy. For one stupid moment, I thought maybe a baby could give us a chance to build something real. I thought maybe you'd be happy too." She saw something break in his face, a crack in the cold armor. "But I was wrong. You never wanted a wife or a family. You wanted a contract. Well, consider the contract broken." Clara climbed the stairs without looking back, each step a declaration of war against the man who had broken her heart into pieces. She didn't know yet that someone had carefully orchestrated that destruction, that envious eyes had watched every move, waiting for the perfect moment to plant the seeds of mistrust. But one thing she knew for sure. She wouldn't stay in a house where she was seen as an opportunist, where her child would be considered a strategic mistake. It was time to leave. And this time, she wouldn't look back. The monastery of Santa Clara rose against Virginia's gray sky, like a beacon of ancient stone, its Gothic towers piercing the low clouds that promised rain. Clara gripped tightly the handle of the only suitcase she had brought, her fingers white from clutching the worn leather so hard. The cold October wind carried the scent of dry leaves and something else, incense perhaps, or just the indefinable fragrance of centuries of prayers. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" asked the taxi driver, looking at the monastery's high walls through the fogged windshield. "It's pretty isolated." "That's exactly what I need," Clara replied, handing him the fare money. Her voice was hoarse from crying so much during the past 2 weeks since she had left the Morgan mansion. The heavy wooden door opened before she could even knock. A middle-aged woman wearing a simple brown habit smiled at her with kind eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. "Clara Bennett," said the nun, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "I'm Sister Catherine. We were expecting you." "Morgan," Clara corrected automatically, then hesitated. "Actually, I don't know what my name is anymore." Sister Catherine reached out to take her suitcase. "In here, you can simply be Clara. Names carry weight, and sometimes we need to let go of the weight to find who we really are." The monastery's interior was a contradiction of simplicity and grandeur. The stone corridors echoed their footsteps like whispers from past generations, but there was a palpable peace in the air that Clara hadn't felt in months. Stained glass windows cast soft rainbows on the walls, and the distant sound of female voices singing created an ethereal symphony. "You can stay as long as you need," said Sister Catherine as they walked. "We don't ask questions here, we just offer silence when needed and conversation when desired. And what if I don't know which one I need? Then you'll stay until you figure it out." The room assigned to her was Spartan but comfortable. A simple bed, a dark wooden table, a chair, and a window that looked out onto an inner garden where other women walked in contemplative silence. Clara placed her suitcase on the bed and sat beside it, finally allowing exhaustion to take over. For the first time in weeks, she placed her hand on her still flat belly where her child was growing. "We're safe now," she whispered to the baby who couldn't hear her yet. "At least for now." The first days at the monastery passed in a comforting fog of routine. Clara participated in morning prayers, even though she wasn't particularly religious, because there was something hypnotic about the voices united in chants that calmed the storm in her mind. She worked in the garden in the mornings, her hands in the damp earth connecting her with something primitive and healing. But it was the afternoons that transformed her. "Do you play piano?" asked Sister Catherine at the end of her first week, finding Clara standing at the chapel door, watching the grand piano that occupied a corner near the altar. "My mother taught me," Clara replied, her fingers tingling with memory. "But it's been years since I played. Hands never forget what the heart learned. Go ahead." Clara approached the instrument as if it were a wild animal that might flee. The bench was at the perfect height, and when she lifted the lid that protected the keys, a familiar aroma hit her, polished wood and the almost imperceptible scent of hundreds of hands that had touched those same keys. Her fingers found the keys hesitantly, pressing some notes at random. The sound echoed through the chapel, pure and crystalline. "My mother used to say that the piano was a confession," Clara murmured, beginning to play a simple melody her mother had taught her as a child, "that it revealed truths that words couldn't express." "And what is your piano confessing now?" asked Sister Catherine, sitting on one of the nearby benches. Clara closed her eyes and let her fingers find their own music, a melancholic melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. "That I'm lost, that I'm afraid, that I don't know if I'm strong enough to raise a child alone. And yet you're here. Yet you chose to stay. I had no choice." "We always have a choice, Clara. The question is whether we have the courage to make the difficult choices." That night, alone in her room, Clara found herself thinking about her mother for the first time in years, without it being accompanied by pain. Marina Bennett had been a woman of mysteries, talented, melancholic, always carrying secrets she never shared. "Mom," Clara whispered to the darkness, "did you know I would end up here? Did you know I would need to learn to be strong?" It was in the second week that the discovery happened. Clara was organizing old sheet music in the chapel when she found a forgotten folder underneath the piano. The music sheets were yellowed with time, and when she opened the first page, her heart stopped. "Compositions by Marina Santos Bennett" was written in elegant handwriting she recognized immediately. "Sister Catherine," Clara called, her voice echoing through the chapel. "Sister Catherine, come here." The nun came running, concern written on her face. "What happened? These sheet music, they're my mother's. How did they get here?" Sister Catherine approached, examining the sheets carefully. "Marina Bennett, that name sounds familiar." She frowned, searching her memory. "Wait here." She returned minutes later with an old record book, the yellowed pages creaking as she leafed through them. "Here," she said, pointing to an entry from 25 years ago. "Marina Santos Bennett was here for 3 months in 1999. She was pregnant and..." "Oh, what?" "It says here that she came seeking refuge during a personal crisis, that she left these compositions as a donation when she departed." Sister Catherine looked up at Clara. "Were you born in 2000? "Born in March 2000. Clara felt her legs weaken. "She was pregnant with me when she was here?" "It seems so. And there's more." Sister Catherine turned a few pages. "She talked a lot about a man named Richard. She said she loved him, but that they couldn't be together." The name hit Clara like lightning. Richard. She had heard that name before, whispered in her mother's feverish delirium during her final days. Richard who? She never said the last name, but... Sister Catherine hesitated. There was something about him being married, about a powerful family that would never accept them together. Clara sat heavily on the piano bench, the sheet music scattered around her like pieces of a puzzle she was just beginning to assemble. "She was running away," Clara murmured, "just like me." "Sometimes daughters repeat their mother's paths," said Sister Catherine gently, "but that doesn't mean they have to have the same destiny." That night, Clara stayed up late reading her mother's compositions. There was pain in those notes, but also hope. And on the last page, written in Marina's delicate handwriting, there was a message that made Clara's heart race. For my daughter, who will one day understand that true love is worth any sacrifice, may she be braver than I was. May she fight for what is rightfully hers. R always knew the truth. One day, she will know too. M. Clara held the page with trembling hands. Her mother had left clues, coded messages about a past Clara had never known. Richard knew the truth about what? What truth was this that her mother had taken to her grave? She placed her hands on her belly, where her child was growing, and made a silent promise. I'm going to find out, Mom. I'm going to discover what secrets you carried, and I'm going to make sure my child never has to grow up without knowing their own history. Outside, the wind howled through the monastery's ancient trees, carrying whispers of buried secrets and truths waiting to be discovered. Clara didn't know yet that her search for answers about her mother's past would lead her back to the future she had left behind. But first, she needed to become strong enough to face whatever truth she found. 3 weeks had passed since Clara found her mother's sheet music, and she couldn't stop thinking about the name Richard. Every morning after prayers, she would sit at the piano and play Marina's compositions, as if the melodies could reveal secrets that words couldn't express. There was something familiar in those harmonies, something that stirred memories she didn't know she possessed. You're different, observed Sister Catherine that November morning, finding Clara in the garden where she usually spent her afternoons. The cold was more intense, and Clara pulled the wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, instinctively protecting her belly that was beginning to show the first signs of pregnancy. Different how? More determined, like someone who found a purpose. The nun sat beside her on the stone bench, the brown habit contrasting with the golden leaves covering the ground. You're going to look for answers about your mother, aren't you? Clara nodded, watching a group of novices walking silently through the cloister. I need to know who Richard was. I need to understand why my mother carried so many secrets. And what if the answers aren't what you expect? Then at least I'll know the truth. That afternoon, Clara was in the monastery library, leafing through old newspapers from Virginia and Georgia, looking for any mention of the name Richard that could connect with her mother, when she heard heavy footsteps in the stone corridors. They were masculine footsteps, strange in that predominantly feminine environment. Sister Catherine, is there someone named Clara Bennett here? The male voice echoed through the ancient walls, and Clara felt her blood freeze. She recognized that voice, deep, authoritative, but different from Garrett's coldness. This one had a more sinister quality. May I ask who wants to know? Came Sister Catherine's polite but firm reply. I'm Vincent Morgan, Garrett Morgan's brother. It's about an urgent family matter. Clara quickly closed the books, her heart racing. Vincent Morgan. She had heard Garrett mention his half-brother a few times, always in a neutral tone that didn't reveal much about their relationship. One moment, please, said Sister Catherine. Minutes later, the nun appeared in the library, her face worried. There's a man asking for you. Says he's your brother-in-law. I heard. Clara stood up, smoothing the simple dress she wore. What does he want? Didn't say, but... Sister Catherine hesitated. There's something about him I don't like. Maybe you should stay here. I can say you're not in. Clara considered the suggestion, but her curiosity was stronger than caution. No. I want to know what he has to say, but can you stay present? Of course. Vincent Morgan was waiting in the small parlor where the monastery received visitors. When Clara entered, he stood up, and she could study him for the first time. He was shorter than Garrett, with brown hair and dark eyes that seemed to calculate every movement. There was a superficial resemblance between the brothers, but where Garrett had an imposing presence, Vincent emanated something that made Clara feel uncomfortable. Clara, he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Finally we meet in person. Vincent Morgan. Mr. Morgan. Clara briefly shook his hand, noticing how his fingers were cold and damp. What brings you here? Family concern, of course. Vincent sat down without being invited, crossing his legs with calculated ease. When we learned that you had left Garrett, we were all very worried. All? My mother, Lucille, and I. Garrett is... well, he's devastated, naturally. Clara doubted that, but kept her expression neutral. And we thought maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Those stories in the press. Vincent shook his head with false sympathy. Very unfortunate. Very unfair to you. You think so? Of course, an innocent young woman from a traditional family being accused of, well, terrible things. Vincent leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on hers. Actually, I came here to offer a solution. Sister Catherine, who was sitting discreetly in the corner of the parlor, moved slightly, and Clara noticed she was also uncomfortable with Vincent's presence. What kind of solution? Well, the matter is complicated by your current condition. Vincent's eyes dropped to Clara's belly, and she instinctively pulled the shawl to cover herself. A child makes everything more complex. More complex how? Vincent sighed dramatically. Clara, may I be frank with you? Please. The Morgan family has a reputation to maintain, businesses to protect, and the presence of a child, especially a child whose paternity has been publicly questioned. He left the sentence hanging. Clara felt anger rising like a hot wave. The paternity wasn't questioned. I know exactly who the father is. Of course, but the public has its own ideas. Vincent stood up and began walking around the small parlor. That's why I came here with a proposal. I'm listening. A financial agreement, generous, enough for you and the child to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. In exchange, you would sign some papers waiving any rights to the Morgan inheritance. The silence in the parlor was thick as fog. Clara could hear the ticking of an old clock on the wall and the distant sound of evening prayers. What rights? She finally asked. Well, technically, as Garrett's wife, you have certain rights over family property, and the child— Vincent stopped walking and stared directly at her. The child would be considered an heir to the Morgan fortune. And you want me to give that up? For fair compensation, yes. Clara stood up, walking to the window that looked out onto the monastery garden. Outside, trees swayed in the cold wind, and she could see other women walking through the outer corridors, their figures wrapped in shawls and peace. Why are you really here, Vincent? I said, no. Clara turned to face him. Why you? Why not Garrett? Why not this Lucille you mentioned? Something changed in Vincent's face, an almost imperceptible hardening. Garrett is busy with business, and my mother thought it best that I come. Or maybe, Clara said slowly, you have your own reasons for wanting me to disappear. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Clara took a step toward him. You wouldn't know anything about how that information about my pregnancy got to the newspapers, would you? Vincent laughed, but there was nervousness in the laughter. Clara, you're being paranoid. Why would I do something like that? Because you're afraid. Afraid of what? Clara was operating on instinct now, following an intuition that came from somewhere deep. Afraid that I'll discover something about the Morgan family that you prefer to keep buried. You're delusional. Am I? Clara moved closer, watching how Vincent backed away slightly. Let me ask you something, Vincent. Did you know a woman named Marina Bennett or Marina Santos? The reaction was instant and revealing. Vincent's face paled, and his eyes widened for a split second before he composed himself. Never heard that name, but it was too late. Clara had seen the truth flashing in his eyes. Liar, she whispered. Vincent quickly headed for the door. You're making a mistake, Clara. A very big mistake. What kind of mistake? He stopped at the door, turning to her one last time. When he spoke, his voice had lost all pretense of cordiality, the kind of mistake that can be dangerous. For you and for the child. His eyes fixed on her belly again. Bad things happen to people who ask too many questions about the Morgan family. Ask your mother. Oh, wait. You can't, can you? The implicit threat in the last sentence made Clara's blood freeze. But before she could respond, Vincent was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the smell of expensive, sickening cologne. Sister Catherine quickly approached. Clara, are you all right? You're pale. He knew my mother, Clara murmured, still looking at the door where Vincent had left. And there's something he doesn't want me to discover. What will you do? Clara placed her hands on her belly, feeling for the first time the gentle movements of her child. Outside, the monastery bells began to ring, calling for evening prayers. I'm going to find out the truth about my mother, about Richard, and about why Vincent Morgan is so desperate to keep me away from the family. She turned to Sister Catherine, her green eyes blazing with a determination that hadn't been there before. Even if it means going back to the place I ran from. But she didn't know yet that the truth she was about to discover would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about her family, and about the man she had left behind. Vincent's visit had planted seeds of unrest that grew like weeds in Clara's mind. 2 weeks had passed since that disturbing encounter, and she couldn't forget the change in his eyes when she mentioned her mother's name. There was recognition there, fear perhaps, and something darker, guilt. Clara was in the monastery library again, surrounded by piles of old newspapers and records that Sister Catherine had obtained from local archives. Her fingers traced names in obituary lists, looking for any connection between Marina Santos and the Morgan family. The smell of old paper and faded ink had become familiar, almost comforting. Marina Santos Bennett, pianist, died at 35 after brief illness, she read aloud, finding her mother's obituary for the 10th time. Survived by husband Thomas Bennett and daughter Clara, 12. Brief illness. Clara had always known there was something strange about her mother's sudden death. Marina had been healthy, full of life, and then, within weeks, she had withered like a cut flower. The sound of hurried footsteps in the corridor made her look up. Sister Catherine appeared at the door, holding a white envelope. "This came for you," said the nun, extending the envelope with a worried expression. It was delivered by a messenger. Clara took the envelope, noticing there was no return address, just her name written in careful block letters. When she opened it, she found a single sheet of paper and a small golden key. "If you want answers about your mother, find Box 247 at First National Bank in Atlanta. The truth is waiting." A friend. Clara held the golden key up to the light. It was small, old, with engraved numbers that matched the number mentioned in the letter. "Who could have sent this?" she murmured. "Someone who knows you, someone who knew your mother." Sister Catherine sat beside her. "The question is whether you can trust this person." Clara put the key in her dress pocket, feeling the cold metal against her fingers. "There's only one way to find out." 2 hours later, she was at the bank in Atlanta, her heart beating fast as she followed an employee to the safe deposit boxes. The golden key trembled in her hand as she inserted it into the lock of Box 247. "Are you sure this is your key, ma'am?" asked the employee, noticing her nervousness. "I am," Clara lied, turning the key until she heard the soft click of the lock opening. Alone in the small private room, Clara opened the box with trembling hands. Inside, there was a brown leather folder, some jewelry she recognized as having belonged to her mother, and a thick sealed envelope with her name. She opened the envelope first. The handwriting was her mother's, but shakier, as if it had been written in haste or pain. "My dear Clara, if you are reading this, it means you discovered what I always feared you would discover. Richard Morgan, yes, Morgan, is your biological father. Thomas Bennett is a good man who agreed to raise you as his own daughter, but you deserve to know the truth about your origins. Richard and I loved each other deeply, but he was married to Lucille, a cruel woman who would have destroyed our lives if she knew the truth. When I discovered I was pregnant, Richard wanted to leave everything to be with us, but I couldn't allow it. I couldn't destroy his family, even if it meant sacrificing our happiness. He left a secret will recognizing you as his daughter and ensuring an inheritance. Lucille doesn't know this, nor does Vincent, her son from a previous marriage. If they find out, you will be in danger. Be careful, my daughter. There are secrets in the Morgan family that have cost lives. With all my love, Marina." Clara had to lean against the chair, the paper trembling in her hands. Richard Morgan, Garrett's father, her biological father. That meant, "Oh God," she whispered, the realization hitting her like lightning. "Garrett is my half-brother." The leather folder contained legal documents, certificates, secretly conducted DNA tests, and a copy of Richard Morgan's will. Clara read quickly, her eyes widening with each line. "I leave to Clara Santos Bennett, my daughter, recognized by paternity test attached, 30% of the shares of Morgan Enterprises and the property known as Willow Hill Farm." Clara stopped reading, her head spinning. Willow Hill, the farm where she had grown up. Richard had secretly bought the property and left it for Marina's husband to manage, ensuring Clara grew up in a stable home. There was more. Photos of Richard and Marina together, smiling, clearly in love. An alternative birth certificate with Richard's name as father, and at the bottom of the folder, a recording on an old microcassette. Clara picked up the small recorder that was in the box and inserted the tape with trembling fingers. Her mother's voice filled the small room, weaker than in her memories, but unmistakably Marina. "Clara, if you're hearing this, it's because something happened to me. I need you to know that Richard had no choice. Lucille found out about us, about you. She threatened me, said she would kill you if I didn't get out of Richard's life forever." Clara held the recorder closer, tears blurring her vision. "I accepted, but Richard made the secret will. He wanted to make sure you would be taken care of. Lucille doesn't know about the will, but she suspects. If something happens to me, Clara, it wasn't an accident. Lucille is capable of—" The recording cut off abruptly, leaving only static buzz. Clara rewound and listened again, each word engraving itself in her memory like red-hot iron. Her mother had been threatened, possibly murdered, and she, Clara, was married to her own half-brother. The safe deposit box phone rang, startling her. It was the bank employee. "Mrs. Bennett, there's someone here asking for you, says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "A Mr. Vincent Morgan." Clara's blood froze. How had Vincent discovered where she was? "Tell him I'm not here," she whispered quickly. "Tell him you never saw me." "But Mom, please, it's a matter of life and death." Clara quickly put all the documents back in the folder, her mind racing. Vincent must have had someone follow her. Or maybe the friend who had sent the key was a trap. She waited 30 minutes before leaving, using a side exit the employee showed her. During the entire drive back to the monastery, she checked the rearview mirrors, looking for cars that might be following. Back in her room at the monastery, Clara spread the documents on the small bed. The truth was there in black and white, but it was a truth that changed everything. If she was Richard Morgan's daughter, then Garrett was her half-brother. The marriage was incestuous, even though neither of them knew it. And the baby. Clara placed her hands on her belly, where her child was growing. The child of half-siblings. What genetic complications could this cause? But there was something more disturbing. If Vincent found out about the will, about her true parentage, he would do anything to prevent her from claiming the inheritance, including— The sound of gravel on the road interrupted her thoughts. Clara ran to the window and saw a familiar black car parking at the monastery entrance. Vincent had found her. She quickly hid the documents under the mattress and ran down the stairs. Vincent was in the parlor again, but this time there was something different about him. An urgency, a dangerous energy. "Clara," he said when she entered, not getting up this time. "What a coincidence finding you here again." "What do you want, Vincent?" "You went to Atlanta today, to the bank." It wasn't a question. Clara kept her expression neutral, even with her heart racing. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." Vincent stood up, approaching her. "You found his safe deposit box, didn't you? Found Richard's documents." "What documents?" Vincent laughed, a humorless sound. "The documents that prove you're my stepfather's bastard daughter. The documents that give you rights to an inheritance that should be mine." The raw admission betrayed him. Clara took a step back. "You knew, all along you knew who I was." "Of course I knew. Why do you think it was so easy to convince Garrett to marry you? Why do you think the arrangement between the families was set up? What do you mean?" Vincent smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression. "I planned it all, Clara. The marriage was my idea. Marrying you to Garrett would ensure you could never claim the inheritance as Richard's daughter. After all, wives of legitimate sons have no rights to their father-in-law's inheritance. You knew we were half-siblings? I hoped you would never find out, and it would have worked if you weren't so curious." Vincent moved closer. "But now you know too much, and that's a problem." Clara looked around for Sister Catherine, but the parlor was empty except for the two of them. "It was you," she whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. "You leaked the information about my pregnancy to the press. You wanted to separate us. Very clever. Yes, it was me. I needed you two away from each other before you discovered the truth about the relationship. The public scandal was perfect. And my mother? She said in the recording that Lucille threatened her. Vincent's smile grew wider and infinitely more cruel. Ah, you found the recording. What a sentimental touch from old Richard. Vincent, was it you who killed my mother? I was just a boy when your mother died, Clara. But, he paused, savoring the moment. Let's say I learned a lot watching my mother work. The confirmation hit her like a punch. Lucille had murdered Marina, and Vincent had learned from her. What do you want? Clara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Simple. You're going to renounce any rights to the Morgan inheritance. You're going to sign the papers I brought, and you're going to disappear. He put his hand in his coat pocket. Forever. And if I refuse? Vincent took his hand out of his pocket, revealing a small syringe. Then you'll have the same fate as your mother, and unfortunately, accidents happen to pregnant women all the time. Clara felt cold fear run through her veins, but along with it came something stronger. Anger. Anger for her mother, for herself, for the innocent child she carried. You won't get away with this, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. Oh, but I will. Just like my mother got away with it all these years. Vincent took another step toward her, the syringe gleaming in the dim light of the parlor. But he had made a mistake. He had confessed too much, revealed too many truths, and Clara had recorded everything on the small device she carried hidden in her pocket. Garrett Morgan sat in his Manhattan office, his 10th cup of morning coffee cooling on the desk while he stared at the divorce papers Vincent had left for him to sign. 3 months had passed since Clara left, and each day seemed longer than the last. The apartment was too quiet, the bed too cold, and his own reflection in the mirror accused him every morning. Maybe she really did plan it all, he murmured to himself, but the words sounded empty even to his own ears. In recent days, fragments of memories from the wedding night came back to haunt him. The genuine surprise in Clara's eyes, the way she had whispered no with an innocence he now recognized as fear, not manipulation. The intercom on his desk buzzed. Mr. Morgan, there's a detective here to see you. Says it's about your wife. Garrett felt his stomach sink. Send him in. The man who entered was older, graying, with eyes that had seen too much. Mr. Morgan, I'm Detective James Crawford. I need to ask some questions about Clara Bennett. Morgan. Is she okay? The question came out more urgent than Garrett intended. For now. But there are some things you need to know. May I sit? Garrett gestured to the chair. What's this about? Crawford opened a thick folder, taking out several photographs. These were taken yesterday at the Monastery of Santa Clara in Virginia. Your wife was being threatened by your half-brother, Vincent Morgan. The photograph showed Clara in the monastery parlor, Vincent approaching her with something in his hand. Even in the grainy quality of the images, Garrett could see the fear on his wife's face. Vincent was there. Why? That's a long story, Mr. Morgan, and I'm sure you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. Crawford leaned forward. Your wife hired me to investigate her mother's death. What we found, well, it changes everything. Garrett felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of changes? Crawford took a digital recorder from the folder. Your wife managed to record a confession from Vincent. Do you want to hear it? With trembling fingers, Garrett pressed play. Vincent's voice filled the office, cold and calculating, confessing about the leak to the press, about the plan to separate Garrett and Clara, about, I planned it all, Clara. The marriage was my idea. Marrying you to Garrett would ensure you could never claim the inheritance as Richard's daughter. Garrett paused the recording, his face losing all color. Richard's daughter? My father's? Keep listening, Crawford said gently. The recording continued, revealing the secret will, the truth about Clara's parentage, Lucille's threats to Marina years before. When it got to the part where Vincent admitted to learning assassination techniques from his mother, Garrett forcefully turned off the device. This can't be true. I'm afraid it is. We did our own investigation after your wife contacted us. The will is real. The DNA tests Richard secretly conducted are authentic. Clara Bennett is your father's biological daughter. Garrett stood up abruptly, walking to the panoramic window overlooking the city. Outside, life continued normally, people walking on sidewalks, cars passing by. But inside that office, his world was crumbling. That means Clara and I are half-siblings, yes. The marriage was technically incestuous, although neither of you knew it. And the baby? Crawford hesitated. That's something you'll need to discuss with specialist doctors. But Mr. Morgan, there's something more urgent. Garrett turned around. What? Vincent knows Clara has the evidence. She's in real danger. The recording we just heard was made yesterday. Vincent threatened her with a syringe, probably containing the same substance that killed her mother. Where is she now? Under protection at the monastery. But we don't know how long that will be enough. Garrett was already grabbing his coat. Let's go there. Mr. Morgan, wait. There's more. More what? Crawford took a series of documents from the folder. While investigating Vincent, we discovered other things. Your stepmother, Lucille, isn't just a murderer. She's been trying to poison you for years. That's ridiculous. Do you remember that flu that lasted weeks when you were 25? Or that food poisoning that almost killed you at 30? Garrett remembered. 2 mysterious episodes where he had become gravely ill without medical explanation. We found evidence that Lucille was administering small doses of poison in your food. Calculated doses to look like natural illnesses, but that would have eventually killed you. Why? Because you were the only legitimate heir standing between her and the complete family fortune. With you dead, Vincent would inherit everything. Garrett sat heavily in the chair, his head spinning. My own family are trying to kill me. There's more. Vincent forged the DNA tests that proved you and Clara were blood siblings. He wanted you to discover the relationship in the worst possible way, to ensure you separated permanently. But she really is my half-sister. Yes, but Vincent manipulated the situation. He knew that if you truly loved each other, the revelation of the relationship would destroy you. It was a cruel psychological move. Garrett thought about the wedding night, the unexpected tenderness he had felt for Clara, the connection that had been born between them. Vincent had destroyed that before it could even bloom. I need to see her, he said, standing up again. I need to explain that I didn't know any of this. Mr. Morgan, she knows you were manipulated just as much as she was, but there's another complication. What? Crawford took out a final series of documents. Vincent isn't acting alone anymore. Lucille found out about the will. They're planning to kill Clara and make it look like an accident. We have information that they're already on their way to the monastery. Garrett's blood froze. When? Now. Garrett grabbed his car keys, already running toward the door. Call the police. Call everyone you can. I'm going there. It's a trap, Mr. Morgan. They expect you to show up. But Garrett was already in the elevator, adrenaline coursing through his veins. For the first time in months, his mind was crystal clear. Clara was in danger. The woman he had unjustly accused, whom he had rejected when she needed him most, was being hunted by people he had considered family. During the entire 3-hour drive to Virginia, Garrett relived every moment since the wedding. The coldness he had shown Clara, the way he had believed Vincent's lies without question, the cruelty of his accusations when she was pregnant and vulnerable. He had failed her in every possible way. He had been the husband Thomas Bennett feared he would be. Cold, distrustful, unable to protect the woman he had promised to love and honor. But there was something deeper he now recognized. That wedding night, when he had let his guard down and allowed Clara to see his vulnerability, he had felt something he had never experienced before. It wasn't just attraction or desire. It was a genuine connection, a sense of completeness that had scared him so much he had fled the next morning. Now, driving through the night toward the monastery, Garrett finally admitted to himself the truth he had denied for months. He was in love with Clara, desperately, completely in love, and she was in danger because of his own family. When he spotted the monastery's Gothic towers against the night sky, Garrett could see strange lights, too much movement for a place that should be in contemplative silence. His heart raced when he realized it might already be too late. He stopped the car at a safe distance and picked up his phone to call Crawford, but the call went straight to voicemail. There was no time to wait for backup. Clara was in there, probably terrified, possibly already hurt. And for the first time in his life, Garrett Morgan was ready to fight for something that truly mattered, even if it meant confronting the demons of his own family. He just hoped he wasn't arriving too late to save the woman he should have protected from day one. Clara was hidden in the highest tower of the monastery, her hands trembling as she held the cell phone Sister Catherine had lent her. Below, she could hear voices, Vincent and an older woman who could only be Lucille. They had arrived an hour ago, claiming to be concerned family coming to get Clara, but Sister Catherine hadn't believed them. "Are you sure you want me to allow these people in?" the nun had asked through Clara's room door. "There's something about them that makes me uneasy." "Don't let them in," Clara had whispered. "Please, they didn't come here to help me." Now, hidden in the tower, Clara could hear fragments of the conversation below. Vincent was getting impatient, his voice rising. "We know she's here. We don't have time for games." The female voice that responded was refined, polite, but there was a coldness in it that made Clara's blood freeze. "Vincent, dear, calm down. These religious people respond better to kindness." Lucille Morgan, the woman who had killed her mother. Clara dialed the number Detective Crawford had given her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Where were the police? Where was the protection he had promised? A new sound from outside made her run to the tower window. Car headlights cut through the darkness, climbing the narrow road that led to the monastery. Her heart jumped when she recognized the black car, the same one Garrett drove. "Garrett," she whispered, a mixture of relief and terror running through her veins. He had come, but now he was also in danger. Below, she heard Vincent curse. "Garrett's here. This complicates things." "Actually, dear, it simplifies them." Lucille's voice sounded almost cheerful. "Now we can solve all our problems at once." Clara descended the tower stairs as quietly as possible, her bare feet making no sound on the cold stone. She needed to warn Garrett. She needed to... The pain that shot through her was sudden and intense, like a knife cutting through her abdomen. Clara leaned against the stone wall, gasping, one hand instinctively going to her 6-month belly. "No," she whispered. "Not now." But another pain came, stronger than the first, and Clara felt something wet running down her legs. When she looked down, she saw blood. "Oh, God," she moaned, sliding down the wall until she was sitting on the cold floor. Outside, she heard the car door slam, heavy footsteps on the main stairs. Garrett's voice echoed through the thick walls. "Vincent! Lucille! I know you're in there!" Clara tried to scream to warn him about the trap, but another contraction doubled her over in pain. The baby was coming, and she was alone, bleeding, hidden in a monastery, while murderers hunted both her and the man she loved. The monastery's main door burst open with a crash. Clara could hear voices now. Garrett confronting Vincent, Sister Catherine trying to intervene, and underneath it all, Lucille's silky and dangerous voice. "Garrett, dear," Lucille was saying, "how good that you came. I was starting to worry." "Where's Clara?" "Safe," Vincent replied. "For now." Clara dragged herself through the corridors, following the sound of voices. Every movement sent waves of pain through her body, but she needed to reach them. She needed to warn Garrett about what Vincent and Lucille really were. When she reached the top of the main staircase, she could see the atrium below. Garrett was in the center, tense like a spring about to snap. Vincent was to his right, and Lucille. Lucille was behind Sister Catherine, a small gun discreetly pressed against the nun's back. "Let her go," said Garrett, his voice carrying an authority Clara had never heard before. "This is a matter between us." "But it's not, dear," said Lucille, her grey hair perfectly arranged even in the chaotic situation. "This dear nun knows too much now, just like you, just like that inconvenient girl who caused so many problems." "What inconvenient girl?" asked Garrett. But Clara could see from his posture that he already knew the answer. "Your dear wife, or should I say half-sister. What a delicious scandal when this leaks to the press." Clara leaned on the banister, trying to breathe through the pain. Blood was pooling beneath her, and she knew she was losing the baby. But she couldn't die here, hidden while Garrett faced alone the murderers who destroyed her family. "Clara is not my half-sister," said Garrett firmly. "Vincent forged those DNA tests." Lucille laughed, a sound that echoed through the ancient walls like broken glass. "Oh dear, do you really believe that? How sweet. But even if Vincent has embellished the truth, The fact remains that she's Richard's bastard daughter, and that means she has rights to an inheritance that should be ours. So that's what this was always about. Money? It's always about money, Garrett. Power. Control. Lucille pressed the gun more firmly against Sister Catherine, who remained surprisingly calm. You were always too naive to understand that. And if you had succeeded in killing me with those poisons, Vincent would inherit everything anyway. Vincent is my son in every way that matters. He deserves the Morgan Empire much more than you. Clara saw Vincent move, taking something from his pocket, the same syringe he had threatened her with the day before. Their plan was becoming clear. They would kill Garrett with the drug, make it look like an accident or overdose, and then find Clara. She tried to scream a warning but could only produce a weak moan. The pain was becoming unbearable, and her vision was beginning to darken at the edges. But it was enough. Garrett looked up and saw her. "Clara?" He started up the stairs, but Vincent moved to block him. "Don't take another step," said Vincent, the syringe now visible in his hand. "One little prick, and you'll have the same end you almost had at 25. Only this time there'll be no hospital to save you." Clara used all her remaining strength to stand up, leaning heavily on the banister. "Garrett," she managed to say, her voice echoing through the atrium. "The police are coming." It was a lie, but she hoped it might give Garrett some advantage. Vincent looked up, his concentration broken for a moment. It was enough. Garrett lunged forward, grabbing Vincent's wrist and twisting until the syringe fell to the marble floor, shattering. "You idiot!" screamed Lucille, and Clara saw with horror that she was pointing the gun directly at Garrett. "No!" Clara screamed, trying to go down the stairs to help, but her legs gave out. She tumbled down the stone steps, each impact sending new waves of agony through her body. When she stopped, she was lying at the foot of the stairs, blood spreading around her, but at least she was close enough to be heard. "Lucille," she said, her voice stronger now that she was desperate. "You killed my mother." The older woman turned to look at her, and Clara saw genuine surprise in her eyes. "You found the evidence." "I found everything. The will, the recordings, Vincent's confessions." Clara tried to sit up, supporting herself on one elbow. "And I recorded Vincent yesterday, confessing that he learned his assassination techniques from you." "That's impossible." Clara took the small digital recorder from her dress pocket, her blood-stained fingers trembling as she pressed play. Vincent's voice filled the atrium. "Then you'll have the same fate as your mother, and unfortunately, accidents happen to pregnant women all the time." The sound of his own words being played back made Vincent stop fighting with Garrett. Lucille stood motionless, the gun still pointed, but her expression showing that she finally understood they had lost. "You're both pathetic," she said finally. 30 years planning, manipulating, building a fortune, and 2 young idiots are going to destroy everything." 3, said a new voice from the main entrance. Detective Crawford was standing in the doorway, accompanied by 4 uniformed police officers, all with weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon, Mrs. Morgan." But Lucille smiled, a terrible and final smile. "If I can't have what's mine, no one can." She pointed the gun directly at Clara, and Clara saw death in her eyes. The shot echoed through the monastery's ancient walls, but it wasn't Lucille who fired. Garrett had thrown himself in front of Clara, and the blood that spread across the marble floor was his. "Garrett!" Clara screamed, crawling to where he had fallen. More shots, screams, sirens outside. But all Clara could see was the blood flowing from Garrett's shoulder, his blue eyes closing as he whispered, "Forgive me, Clara. Forgive me." And then the pain took her completely, and she collapsed beside him, her hands searching for his as the world darkened around them. The smell of disinfectant and the constant sound of monitors were the first things Clara registered when she slowly emerged from the darkness. Her eyelids felt heavy as lead, and when she finally managed to open them, the white hospital light made her blink several times before her vision adjusted. "Clara?" The voice was gentle, feminine, filled with relief. "Clara, can you hear me?" Clara tried to speak, but her throat was dry as paper. She could only manage a weak moan before a gentle hand touched her forehead. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been through a lot." The woman leaned down, and Clara saw it was a nurse with kind eyes and gray hair. "You're at Virginia General Hospital. You and your baby are safe. Baby. The word hit Clara like lightning, and her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. It was flat, empty, but there wasn't the stabbing pain she remembered. My baby, she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and broken. He's fine. It's a boy, and he's okay. The nurse smiled, adjusting the pillows behind Clara's head. It was an emergency cesarean. He was born premature, but he's breathing on his own and fighting like a warrior. Tears of relief began to stream down Clara's face. Can I see him? Soon. First, you need to recover a little more. You lost a lot of blood. How long was I unconscious? 3 days. There were complications during surgery, but Dr. Martinez said you're a fighter. 3 days. Clara tried to process this. Memories came back in fragments. The confrontation at the monastery, Vincent with the syringe, Lucille with the gun, and then, Garrett, she said abruptly, trying to sit up in bed. Garrett was shot. Where is he? Is he okay? The nurse gently helped her lie back down. He's here at the hospital too. He was hit in the shoulder, but he's recovering well. Actually, she looked toward the door. He spent most of his time here in the hallway waiting for you to wake up. He's here? Since day one, we practically had to force him to go home and shower. The nurse checked the monitors connected to Clara. I'll call him, but first there are some people who want to talk to you. The police need your statement. Clara nodded, although part of her just wanted to see Garrett and her baby. But she knew she needed to close that terrible chapter before she could move forward. 10 minutes later, Detective Crawford entered the room accompanied by a younger woman who introduced herself as Assistant Prosecutor Rebecca Walsh. How are you feeling? Asked Crawford, pulling a chair close to the bed. Like a truck ran over me, Clara answered honestly. Vincent and Lucille. Vincent is in custody awaiting trial. Charges include attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and blackmail. Crawford consulted his notes. The recording you made was fundamental in building the case. And Lucille? Prosecutor Walsh leaned forward. Lucille Morgan died during the confrontation. When the police entered, she tried to shoot again. She was killed in self-defense. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, processing the information. There was a part of her that felt relieved that the woman who killed her mother was dead, but also a strange sense of emptiness. All that pain, all that destruction because of greed and envy. My father's will, biological father's, is it valid? Perfectly valid, Walsh replied. Actually, there's more. We discovered that Richard Morgan had established an additional trust fund for you, separate from the main will. Vincent and Lucille never knew about it. How much? Enough that you'll never have to worry about money again. Enough to ensure your son has every opportunity in the world. Clara felt a bitter irony. Money. It was always about money. But now that she had it, all she wanted was to have her mother back, to have a real family, to have... Garrett, she whispered. Can I see him now? Crawford and Walsh exchanged glances. There's something you need to know first, said Crawford gently, about the legal situation between you two. Clara felt her stomach sink. What? Technically, you're still married, but given the nature of the family relationship... Walsh hesitated. The marriage will need to be annulled. I understand. Clara had expected this, but it still hurt. And my son. Legally, he'll be considered Garrett's child. Regardless of the circumstances of birth, he won't have legal problems. Walsh leaned forward. Clara, you need to know that Garrett fought for this. He hired the best lawyers to ensure both you and the child were protected. After the officials left, Clara was alone with her thoughts for a few minutes. Then she heard a gentle knock on the door. Clara? Garrett's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. May I come in? Yes. When he appeared in the doorway, Clara felt her heart race. He was thinner, with deep, dark circles under his eyes, and his left arm was in a sling. But his blue eyes were more alive than she had ever seen them. How are you? He asked, slowly approaching the bed. Alive, she replied simply. You? Same. He stopped beside the bed, his free hand nervously playing with the sling. Clara, I don't even know where to begin. Start at the beginning. Garrett pulled the chair Crawford had used and sat down, finally meeting her eyes. I'm sorry, for everything. For believing Vincent's lies, for accusing you, for leaving when you needed me most. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have trusted you. I should have seen that Vincent was manipulating everything. Garrett leaned forward. Clara, when I saw you falling down those stairs, when I saw all that blood, I thought I had lost you forever. And I realized that... What? That I love you. The words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid of losing them if he didn't say them quickly. I know it's complicated. I know we're half-siblings. I know that makes everything impossible. But I need you to know that I love you. Clara felt tears burning her eyes. Garrett, you don't need to say anything. I just needed you to know, and I want you to know that I'll take care of you and the baby, no matter what happens. I may not be able to be your husband, but I can be your friend. I can be a father to our son. Our son, Clara repeated softly. Do you really want to be his father, even knowing that? He's my son in every way that matters, Garrett said firmly. And he's your son. That's all I need to know. Clara extended her hand, and after hesitating for a moment, Garrett took it. The touch was electric, familiar, full of all the possibilities they could never explore. I love you too, she said quietly. And that's going to make everything much harder. I know. They sat in silence for a few minutes, hands intertwined, both knowing this might be one of the last moments of intimacy they would share. Can I see our son? Garrett finally asked. I haven't seen him yet either. Want to go together? The nurse helped put Clara in a wheelchair, and Garrett pushed her through the corridors to the neonatal ICU. When they arrived at the nursery, Clara saw for the first time the tiny being she had carried for 6 months. He was tiny, connected to tubes and monitors, but when he opened his eyes, Clara saw something that made her cry. Garrett's blue eyes, but with the same fierce determination she recognized when she looked at herself in the mirror. He's perfect, Garrett whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He's a fighter, said the ICU nurse. Born breathing on his own, which is rare for 6 months. The doctors say in a few weeks he can go home. What are we going to call him? Asked Garrett. Clara had thought about this during the last few months. Peter James Morgan. Peter after my grandfather, and James after James Crawford, who helped us find the truth. Garrett smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since their wedding night. Peter James Morgan, I like it. Later, when Clara was back in her room and Garrett had gone to get coffee, she allowed herself to cry. She cried for the mother who would never meet her grandson. She cried for the love she and Garrett shared but could never fully express. And she cried with relief because, despite everything, they had survived. When Garrett returned, she had dried her tears. So, she said, trying to keep her voice light, what do we do now? Garrett sat down again, placing 2 cups of coffee on the bedside table. Now we figure out how to be a family, even if it's not the way we imagined. And how do we do that? One day at a time, he replied, extending his hand to her again. One day at a time. Outside, snow had begun to fall, covering the world in a clean white blanket. And for the first time in months, Clara felt something she had forgotten how to experience: hope. A year later, Willow Hill Farm had transformed into something neither Marina nor Clara could have ever imagined. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the fields, where before there had been only the melancholic silence of unrealized dreams. Clara was sitting on the main house porch, watching a group of children running among the century-old trees, their voices creating a symphony of joy that made her heart sing. Piano lessons start in 10 minutes, shouted Sarah, one of the teachers from the music center Clara had created. Who wants to play the new song we learned yesterday? A dozen small hands shot up in the air, and Clara smiled. The Marina Bennett Music Center had been operating for 6 months, offering free music lessons to underprivileged children in the region. It was funded by the inheritance Richard had left her, money that had cost so many lives, but now created new life. Mommy, Peter's small voice made her look down. At 18 months, he already walked with the fierce determination of someone much older, and his blue eyes, Garrett's eyes, sparkled with constant curiosity. Music? Yes, love, music, Clara replied, picking up the boy. Want to hear the children playing piano? Peter nodded enthusiastically, clapping his little hands. He had inherited the love of music from both her and Marina. Sometimes Clara would find him in the main studio, trying to reach the keys of the grand piano that now occupied the place of honor in the house's main room. The sound of tires on the gravel road announced the arrival of a familiar visitor. Clara didn't need to look to know who it was. Every Tuesday at 3 o'clock sharp, Garrett came to visit Peter. "Daddy!" Peter shouted, pointing to the black car approaching. Clara felt the familiar pang of pain and joy that always accompanied Garrett's visits. A year had passed since their marriage annulment, but the feelings hadn't diminished. If anything, they had intensified due to the impossible closeness of the situation. Garrett got out of the car, and Clara noticed he seemed more relaxed lately. The last few months had been kind to him. Business was flourishing. The criminal case against Vincent had concluded with a 20-year prison sentence, and he had found a peace she hadn't seen in him since their wedding night. "Hello, Clara," he said, climbing the porch steps. There was careful formality in their interactions now, a respectful distance that both maintained to protect their hearts. "Garrett." She handed Peter to him, watching how the man's face lit up when he held his son. "How was court today?" Vincent was formally sentenced, 20 years with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Garrett tossed Peter in the air, making the boy laugh. "It's over, Clara, finally over." Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The last year had been a whirlwind of depositions, hearings, and trials. Garrett had testified against Vincent, revealing decades of manipulation and abuse. The poisoning attempts, the blackmail, Marina's death, everything had come to light. "And how do you feel?" Garrett sat in the rocking chair next to hers, Peter on his lap playing with his shirt buttons. "Relieved. Free. For the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe completely." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the children play in the garden. A girl about 7 years old approached the porch, looking shyly at Clara. "Miss Clara, can I ask something?" "Of course, Emma, what is it?" "Did you really grow up here in this house?" Clara smiled. "I did. In that same room up there." She pointed to her old bedroom window. "And did you play piano when you were little like us?" "I did. My mother taught me in that room there." Clara pointed to the main room where the sound of a piano lesson could be heard through the open windows. "Was your mother good at piano?" "She was the best I knew." Emma smiled and ran back to her friends. Garrett watched the interaction with a gentle smile. "You've done something incredible here, Clara. Marina would be proud." "I hope so." Clara smoothed her dress, a simple blue dress that Peter had insisted she wear because it's pretty like the sky. "Sometimes I feel her here, you know? When the children are playing, when there's music filling the house, it's like she finally found peace." "And you, have you found peace?" The question caught her off guard. Clara looked at Garrett, saw the genuine concern in his eyes, and had to look away. "I'm trying." "Clara," Garrett began, then stopped. Peter had fallen asleep in his lap, small fists clutching his father's shirt. "Can I say something?" "You always can. I know our situation is complicated. I know we can't have what maybe we both want. But I want you to know that these are the happiest moments of my week." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Garrett, let me finish. I think about you every day. I think about Peter. I think about what it would be like if we could be a real family. And I know you think about it too." "Of course I think about it, but nothing has changed, I know." Garrett sighed, stroking Peter's dark hair. "I just wanted you to know that, regardless of what we can't have, I'm grateful for what we do have. I'm grateful you gave me this incredible boy. I'm grateful you showed me what real love is." Clara wiped away a tear that had escaped. "You can't say these things." "Why not?" "Because it makes everything harder." Garrett studied her for a long moment. "Clara, can I ask you something?" "What?" "Are you happy? Truly happy?" The question made her pause. Was she happy? She had her son. She had a purpose. She had this beautiful place full of music and laughter. She had financial security, friends, a meaningful life. But at night, when Peter was sleeping and the house was quiet, she felt incomplete, as if an essential part of herself was always missing. "I am content," she said finally. "Content isn't happy. It's what I can have." "But what if it wasn't?" Clara looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Garrett carefully transferred Peter to her, making sure the boy didn't wake up. Then he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the golden afternoon fields. I talked to my lawyers last week about our legal situation. Garrett, we already discussed this. The annulment was the only option. Not about that. He turned to face her. About adoption. Adoption? Legally, I can adopt Peter as my son, even without being married to you. That would give us shared custody rights, but more importantly, he paused. It would mean Peter would be my son legally and officially, not just biologically. Clara felt her heart race. Why are you telling me this? Because there's something else. My lawyers did research. In some states, there are legal precedents for situations like ours. What kind of situations? Couples who discovered kinship after marriage, but who want to remain together as a family. Garrett approached again. Clara, there's a possibility, small but real, that we could be together. Legally. Clara felt as if the world had stopped spinning. How? It would be complicated. We'd have to move to another state. We'd have to prove we didn't know about the kinship when we married. We'd have to go through psychological evaluations, legal hearings. Garrett knelt beside her chair. But it would be possible. Garrett, I can't ask that of you. Your reputation, your business. Clara, look at me. She obeyed, meeting those blue eyes that haunted her dreams. I built an empire, but it means nothing without you and Peter. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I feel poor without a real family. He took her free hand. I love you. I love our son. And if there's a chance, even a small one, that we can be together, I want to try. Clara looked at Peter sleeping in her arms, then at Garrett kneeling beside her, then at the farm that had become a home not just for her and her son, but for dozens of children who came here to find music and joy. What if it doesn't work? Then at least we'll have tried, and we'll continue being family the way we can. Clara closed her eyes, hearing the sound of a child playing a childish version of one of her mother's compositions on the piano. When she opened her eyes again, Garrett was still waiting, hope and fear in equal parts shining on his face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, I want to try. I want us to be a real family. The smile that lit up Garrett's face was like the sun rising after the longest storm. He leaned over and kissed her forehead, a gentle kiss full of promise. I love you, Clara Morgan. I love you too, Garrett Morgan. Peter chose that moment to wake up, blinking sleepily and smiling to see both parents near him. Mommy, Daddy, music? Clara and Garrett laughed, and for the first time in over a year, it seemed like everything might really be okay. Outside, the sun was setting over Willow Hill, painting the fields golden and casting long shadows that seemed to connect the past to the future. And in the house that had seen so much suffering, there was finally music, love, and the promise that sometimes even the most complicated stories can have a happy ending. Sometimes the truest love is born from the most impossible circumstances. Clara and Garrett discovered that family isn't just about blood or legality. It's about choice, courage, and the determination to fight for what really matters. They transformed a silent farm into a place full of music and hope, proving that even the most painful secrets can become seeds of something beautiful. Because in the end, maybe love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone every day, even when the whole world says it's impossible. And you? Do you believe that true love can overcome any obstacle? If this story touched your heart, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories that speak directly to the soul.